Chelsea. Come on, Rory. Come on.
I don't think I can.
12th place.
I mean, 12th. It's
amazing.
Appalling, isn't it?
It's bad, isn't it?
It's such a bad season.
Below Palace.
Ollie, it's genuinely our worst ever season. I think it's our worst ever season. And of course, there have been worse seasons over the years in the history of Chelsea.
Chelsea they've been relegated before.
Yeah, Chelsea were founded in 1905, so there's obviously been some very turbulent years. But I genuinely believe that this is the worst season that is on record in terms of expectation, in terms of ability, in terms of what we thought this squad could be, and where we actually finished and what was actually delivered and served up to us. I think this is as bad as it's ever been.
Wow. Pochettino is on his way in. I just want a one-word answer. He's actually the manager of, I think, the rest of the world on Sunday, live on talkSPORT Soccer Aid. Does he have a better squad with the group of celebrities or the Chelsea team?
Maybe. I mean, Robbie Williams, his mate, would probably get into the Chelsea team at the moment. I'm surprised we didn't sign him. So, I think that we are all over the place. And, for Pochettino, look, I understand the allure of managing Chelsea. It's a prestigious club with a rich history and you get to live in London, in a particularly beautiful part of West London. Of course, there are loads of reasons why you take the job. But, if you look at this strictly through the lens of... If you look at this strictly through the lens of being an aspirational, ambitious manager, I don't really know what's in it for you because Chelsea can't compete for the league next year. That's not going to happen. So from Pochettino's perspective, ultimately what would be considered success will be what? Top 5? Top 4? And maybe any kind of silverware? Any kind of domestic silverware? So a League Cup and 5th place, a League Cup and the FA Cup and maybe not in the Champions League spots. But that's not really... when you think of his stock, what his personal ambition
he's been linked with, yeah.
The jobs he's been linked with. Obviously, he was very recently the Paris Saint-Germain manager, who have an overall objective of winning the European Cup. That's what they're striving to do. And you think that his ambition would align with that, and yet he's come to Chelsea, a side that aren't in the European Cup spots. I don't really know what's in it for him, apart from, obviously, a lucrative package, managing in the Premier League. I get it. Just... when you think about what he could be doing and what he's accepted, I'm slightly surprised.
Yeah, what he is going to have to do is a bit of a squad clear-out, let's be honest. But one of the players that's been linked away, and I'm really interested to hear how you feel about this, Mason Mount has been linked with Manchester United, of course. How do you take that news as a Chelsea fan? Because, he's obviously kind of one of your own, isn't he? He's Champions League winner as well. But how do you feel about that?
I think Mount leaving Chelsea is a disaster. It's a complete disaster. It's actually, I think that the new regime who have come in, I think we've just had a year, the anniversary, not that I'll be celebrating, of the Boehly era. And I think that of all of the catastrophic decisions that have been made by Clearlake, Boehly, Egbali, I think allowing Mason Mount to leave is probably the worst of the lot.
The worst decision?
I think it's the worst decision, not necessarily only because of the player that Mason Mount is. Look, I think he's a terrific little footballer. I think he's brilliant at what he does. I think that he's such a thorn in the side of the opposition. I think managers love him. I think he's brilliant on the ball. I love Mason Mount. I think he's a terrific player. However, I think there is something symbolic in Mason Mount leaving Chelsea. It's actually part of a redefinition of who Chelsea are, in my opinion. Sometimes you can have a moment in any football club where a sale of a player or the purchase of a player can actually redefine that football club. So, for example, when I was a kid and Chelsea signed Rudiger and Mark Hughes, that was the start of something new. That was the redefinition of Chelsea. Chelsea had been in the wilderness for well over 2 decades, and suddenly there was a new look to a Chelsea team. Equally, when Sir Alex Ferguson left Manchester United, they had to be redefined. I think that when a player leaves a club, you can have that. And do you know what this gives me feelings of? Mason Mount leaving Chelsea feels fairly similar to when Ashley Cole left Arsenal. Ashley Cole left Arsenal. He was part of a team that got to a European Cup final, and he decided that enough was enough and he needed to leave to fulfill his own personal ambition, to be the very best that he could be, and to test himself at the very top. He needed to leave Arsenal, and he went to Chelsea. And I think his decision there was proved factually correct. He left. Arsenal went nearly a decade without a trophy. Arsenal didn't win a trophy between 05 and 14, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So,
Chelsea, he left. He joined Chelsea, he won a European Cup, countless leagues, a double. He did really well. And I think that Ashley Cole leaving was an indicator and symbolic of the direction that the two clubs were going in. Sadly, I think Mason Mount leaving, what does it represent? Mason Mount's leaving Chelsea.
It represents, as you just said, the end of a bit of an era, really.
Yeah, well, also, all you've got to do, for a little bit of a clue as to this, as to whether it's the right decision or not, all you've got to do is look at the clubs that are in hot pursuit of Mason Mount. Like, it can't be a coincidence that the clubs that Mason Mount is being linked with are all clubs that finished above Chelsea in the league and won more than Chelsea this season.
How do you think he's feeling about it as well? I mean, surely he wants to go to Man United over Chelsea.
I think no, I don't think he does.
Bit hot.
I don't think he does. I think he's been hung out to dry, to be totally honest with you. I think for his own personal ambition, he needs to leave. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that he would stay. And I think that often when we talk about footballers at certain football clubs, we want them to feel like us. Like, I'd play for Chelsea for free. I'd paid for the privilege. But you can't expect footballers to behave like that. You can't expect Mason Mount to do that. And obviously, he feels like he is well in need and deserving of a pay rise because he's at Chelsea. He's on, by their standards. Obviously, I'm not being sneery about the amount of money here. I'm fully aware of the value in a pound note. But by the comparison to his peers, he is on a pitiful wage. He is on a pitiful wage by comparison to everyone around him. So obviously he wants a pay rise because he's looking at Kalidou Koulibaly earning 3 times his salary. He's looking at Raheem Sterling earning 3 times his salary. Yeah. He's looking at players like Mudryk and Cucurella earning 3 times his salary. So he is correct to insist on a pay rise because he has been a truly brilliant servant to the club. Like, very few players managed to win Chelsea Player of the Year on 2 occasions. Like, in terms of the players that have done that in the past, you're looking at Juan Mata, Eden Hazard, John Terry, Gianfranco Zola. You were looking at, like, the creme de la creme. You know, the absolute diamonds at Chelsea in our history. Mason Mount has done that. Yeah. He is a brilliant player. He's been at the club since he was 8. Having players like that at the club is so valuable, not only because of what he brings on the pitch, but because of who he is, because of his rapport with the fans, because of his relationship and his understanding of what Chelsea represent. So allowing him to leave, I think it is symbolic of the direction of this new ownership. I think it's a travesty, and I do stand by it being the worst decision. And there are many to discuss here, but I think this is the worst decision that has been made by this new era.
Before we move on to who else should leave in this squad, on the heartbreak stakes, where are you? Between one and staying in for 3 weeks and watching Bridget Jones, Mason Mount leave, where are you?
Yeah, I'm gutted. I am gutted because I think that we need players like him. Players who have been at the club since they're 8 years old. Like, watching him play an incredibly significant part on the road to lifting European Cup. Watching him, play that through ball to Kai Havertz to round Man City's keeper in Portugal. It was a dream. And I'm gutted that it's come to this. But, this is who Chelsea are at the moment, and we're going to have to make our peace with it.
Who else do you think is going to be shown the door then? You've got the likes of Loftus-Cheek, Chalobah.
Yeah, Loftus-Cheek's for Milan.
Who needs to go for you?
Well, I mean, it's ridiculous what's happened here. And when we were talking about this being the worst decision made by this board, this is why this board have been such a catastrophe since the day they started, since the day they took the reins. It's been catastrophic. So Mauricio Pochettino is famed for wanting a small, tight, condensed squad. He wants a compact squad. You're bringing him in, a man that's famed for wanting a tight squad, just as you've inflated the squad beyond recognition. Like, you've made such a foolish error because you've brought in so many players. Now Pochettino's going to want to bring in his own men as well, and you're going to have to do pretty much a one-in, one-out policy.
I mean, there were reports, weren't there, of Lampard and Potter as well having to
two training
sessions.
Yeah, two
with
training
subs.
Sessions. I know, it's ridiculous.
It's
truly ridiculous. And when you look at the players now that are leaving, they're talking about Loftus-Cheek going to AC Milan. I think that's probably right. I think that's probably the correct decision for everybody involved there. But Kovacic to Man City, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good at all. Mateo Kovacic is obviously good enough to play for Man City. Therefore, he must be good enough to play for Chelsea. So we're letting Mount go. And even Mason Mount weirdly has a lot of detractors. I don't quite understand it. But certain people don't rate him or like him or whatever. But I think even if you were to ask a non-conformist to Mason Mount's ability, even if you were to ask somebody who's fairly scathing about what he delivers on a pitch, they ask that perennial question, don't they? They'll always say, what does he actually do? Even those players must rate him as one of Chelsea's better players, as they would rate Mateo Kovacic as one of Chelsea's better players. And yet they're the two that are leaving.
One last quick question as well. In any reprieve for Lukaku, do you think he has a future at Chelsea? Do you think he can come back in? Under Pochettino?
It's so difficult with Romelu Lukaku because if there is principle, Romelu Lukaku should never, ever have the opportunity or privilege of playing on Stamford Bridge as a home player ever again. In terms of his conduct, in terms of what he did to Chelsea Football Club, the disrespect that he showed the fans, the manager at the time and the people that were paying his wages at the time, it was totally out of order. You know, he went off, conducted an unsanctioned interview with Sky Italia where he hung the club and his teammates out to dry. That is obviously totally unacceptable. However, principle in football, it makes me think about Rafael Benitez's quote, you know, where he said football is effectively a lie. I think there is some truth in that. Of course, Romelu Lukaku shouldn't play for Chelsea, but if he scores 2 goals on the opening day of the season, everybody will immediately forget the way that he treated the club. Wrongly.